Andrew. How are you? Hello. Oh, what a good intro phrase. I love that. That's the Shining reference, right? From the door. I love it. Okay. Oh, I just realized that I am reusing a sake cup. This is not sake, this is water, by the way. Hello, how are you? I'm excited to have this conversation because I think, talk about this. We often end up talking about this because the subject itself is always so relevant to all the different things that we are talking about, because so many things relate back to how humans respond to forced ideologies. Aww. Andrew, oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I had to move off of TikTok because of the TOS, and also the, it being bought by Oracle, and that leading to a lot of concerns on a safety level when it came to, streaming and anybody who I would be interacting with, like, not just for myself, but also I didn't want to ask people who would be willing to show up to those streams to, oh, what did I do? To do that. Oh. What? Okay, fixed it. Okay. I didn't want to ask anyone to do that when it's something that I wouldn't want to do myself. So I kind of hopped around trying to figure out what would work best, and I'd always wanted to start making YouTube videos, so I now stream on YouTube, and I also am, working on making videos. I did have a bit of a pause because I had a death in my family and a couple of other things that were going on that definitely forced me to kind of pause and take a backseat to doing those things and being able to kind of respond to those situations. But oh, well, actually, that happened. That's not why that happened. Oh, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that a lot. That happened because I was well, how do I put this? So from what I was told, the live stream program was getting reorganized and cut. Which was a very diplomatic way of removing anyone who had been part of the team that I had been a part of, in order to, I think, make way for a new structure. There were some other components to that as well that were frustrating at best. I had kind of acknowledged certain issues that I'd asked for support with, and instead of getting support, I was removed. So, yeah. Certain safety concerns I had. But, yeah, so that is why that has ended, and did end. I was not given a choice. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Andrew. From what I gathered, it actually wasn't necessarily because my performance had much to be critiqued. There were other components at play. I did, at the time when it happened, which, was a few months ago, I did stream to have a conversation about it, and did have some very, I was able to have certain conversations that were pretty helpful, but yeah. Aw. I yeah, I how do I explain? How do I say this? I don't ever want to celebrate the lessening of an audience for a brand that is a small business, but at the same time, I am absolutely never going to support them ever again. So I appreciate seeing that. I appreciate hearing that. Yeah. This is my life for like 3 years. Just constant every day. Lot went into that. But now I've had some time to, I think, restructure and kind of figure out how to move forward, and it hasn't been easy. But especially in the economy we're in right now, there's been a lot of what am I going to do? But at the same time, one very big positive from all of that is that I essentially was given time I had not had to start teaching myself about how YouTube works and all of the extra components that go into video editing and creating videos and, doing research in a way that is ideal for videos versus how like I used to do it when I was doing like term papers. Like it's not that dissimilar, but it is still a process to learn. So I am grateful that I was unintentionally given a period of time to learn and to start working on a skill that I definitely needed to learn. So, oh, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that infinitely. I really do. I really, really do. I would love to do your social media. Yeah, I think that's the only thing I miss about it was being able to see the back end of how social media works and also learn a little bit about content creation and just the process of making content is quite fun when it's in a more silly lane or like a less maybe traditional type of lane. Oh, Ellie, I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah. It does hurt. You never realize how much you put into something. Well, sometimes you don't realize how much you put into something until suddenly you no longer need to, and it just makes you realize how much of your life and your time was dedicated towards fitting the ideal that you needed to fit in that space. So it was definitely a big adjustment. I was kind of getting shifted away and out of that entire world because there is like a world, and yeah. I guess in some ways there are certain things about how I operate that don't quite fit because I appreciate commerce, but I am not a proponent of capitalism. So, and those are two very different things. I would love to have a conversation about commerce versus capitalism if y'all are interested, because it is two very different things and often misidentified as the one and the same. So I would love to do a video about that actually, but that does actually still also kind of tie into our conversation about today, which is anti-authoritarian anime. What's fascinating to me is I did not realize how many people did not know that anime is anti-authoritarian. How many seminal works that are just core components of like introductory anime for so many people are not recognized as anti-authoritarian. Everything from One Piece to Gundam. People don't seem to always recognize how every component of it is anti-authoritarian. And even even Transformers, which was inspired, I think, pretty heavily by, I know they came out in similar time periods, but were very inspired by each other, also super anti-authoritarian. So, like, I mean, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that, Andrew. I made this dress ages ago, and I am starting to see all the spaces that it needs to be fixed. So thank you. I just noticed a thing earlier. I was like, oh no, my sleeve's all messed up, so I have to fix it. But thank you. I made it a couple of years actually ago, and it was an exercise in learning a lot of different components of sewing that I'm glad I learned, but I hope I've gotten better at since. So thank you. I appreciate that infinitely. But yeah. Okay, so one thing that I think was really interesting is, I feel like we have this conversation pretty often when it comes to anime, and when we're just kind of discussing various shows that we really connect to or we really appreciate with anime. And one of the first things that I was surprised by was the conversation surrounding anime on outside of left-wing spaces, because I hadn't even realized that it was possible for people to see the same shows that I was watching and that are so deeply celebrated all over the world and not get the what to me was extraordinarily clear messaging. I was very surprised to see. Oh, that's a good question, Ellie. What was a piece of art that you never realized had another message until recently? That is an exceptionally good question. I have to think on that for a sec, actually. Ah. Looking around at my books. What's the first? Good question. Ah, Andrew, thank you so much. I am not making any money off of my clothing because I have not sold anything. Largely because I haven't, I guess, the bulk of what I've made so far are not really in the style that I would want to be like representative of me and my brand, but I do have, I am working towards the ability to make clothing and to be able to launch a clothing brand. So I am on that path, but thank you. And then I have to think about that, Ellie. So I'm gonna let myself try and percolate on that in the back of my mind while I kind of bring up some of these stories, because I'm sure things will come to mind as I'm talking and as we're discussing together different stories and different things. But let's see. Okay, so like the messaging I kept seeing, which surprised me so profoundly, was commentary from people who were saying that anime is a great medium to partake in or to become involved in as a fan, because it's not political, because it doesn't have any specific messaging. Are we watching the same shows? And some of the shows that are being referenced are things like Fullmetal Alchemist or Gundam. And those shows are 100% about fascism. They're 100% about what happens when a government turns into a tyrannical force that views humans as expendable and decides to avoid the accountability that should be required to be part of a human system. But instead, they use concepts and systems like capitalism to encourage a apathy through exhaustion in the populace to avoid, and also propaganda and the normalization of very harmful ideologies to other groups of people who are easy to other, so that the grand population can focus on those groups instead on what the tyrannical government is doing. You see that in Fullmetal Alchemist. You see that in Dragon Ball. You see that in One Piece with the pirates. That was the one that really shocked me. Was, I haven't watched One Piece. I've only seen little snippets and bits, but I have definitely listened to a lot of breakdowns about One Piece. And the thing that even me as someone who's just barely kind of getting a sense of what the story is about, is very clear that you're talking about pirates. Inherently, pirates were they were what are a lot of our, I guess, modern day terrorists are now, where they would, or highway robbers of the sea, where they were people who flouted maybe some of the social conventions of the time and created their own societies in order to circumnavigate whatever situations had forced them into a alternative space to begin with. So inherently, especially with One Piece, because Luffy is attempting to gain freedom and also attempting to understand more about the world that is very that he lives in, and also to become a leader of sorts in an effort to change how the world that he lives in looks and works, he would be branded as a terrorist. And Hassan Piker actually acknowledged this in a podcast that he went on. Oh, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but acknowledged this in a podcast that he went on where he was talking about how One Piece is an extraordinarily political anime. And the people in the podcast he was like having a conversation with were so deeply uncomfortable about having that conversation, because it was important to them that One Piece not be political, because they didn't find it comforting anymore if One Piece was political. And that is a crux of how a lot of I realized kind of centrist and center right and then deeper and farther right mentalities approach a lot of medias that others are able to easily identify as critiquing large-scale social issues. Oof. Yes, it does. It does, Ellie. I think that's so fair. It is very clearly political, and I don't want to spoil the story of Fullmetal Alchemist. And there are two essentially iterations that interpret the way the anime is portrayed differently, because Fullmetal Alchemist was a manga that was adapted into an anime, and the first adaptation was done with some, I guess you could say, relatively strong rewrites, and the second was done in a more faithful to the manga structure. But neither of them changed the core story, personality types, or major issues that happen in the story. And neither of them dumb down or soften the ultimate political messaging, which is very much about how people operate within a fascist society when they don't realize it is a fascist society, especially when there is a propagandized understanding of what certain conflicts were about, and then they find out only through having access to knowledge that is traditionally gate-kept to recognize their perceptions were wrong. And as a result, their prejudices that they were celebrated for having beforehand were wrong. And having to come to terms with that while also trying to decide how and what to do, because it would require such intense, large-scale response to adjust and address the wrongs that have been done. And it's terrifying. It's deeply terrifying. But what's interesting is that there are certain definite, I think, parallels between, which we now only understand because, you know, we didn't have a lot. I think a lot of people did not have this conversation comfortably before October 7th of 2023, where there are parallels that you could draw between Fullmetal Alchemist, like the Empire, and then the Ishvalans, who are the main kind of what do you call it? They are the enemy group of that the main characters are not directly having to fight at all times, but that had a huge effect on the structure of how their empire is formed and the power within it is maintained. Yeah, yep. And there's that they call, and so for reference in Fullmetal Alchemist, the leader is called the Führer. And there's a reason for that. It's supposed to show you what can be normalized if you have a effective enough control of information. The people who are in the Empire and under the rule of the Führer are not going to realize why that is a problem, but we as the audience are going to immediately get a clue that something is off, something is wrong, because we have our collective understanding of the last time somebody called themselves a Führer and where that went and how bad that was. And that is, so there's, but that's also the thing about the way that FMA is structured, is it's an easy comparison to Palestinians and Israel, as well as to almost every other major conflict where you have a minority group that is being demonized and otherized by a group that is trying to attain large masses of land and power. So with that, you also, of course, then have Jewish populations, Roma populations, and political dissidents. Anybody who was anti-Nazi was very easily, you could qualify them as in the same kind of structure of being propagandized and demonized, the way the Ishvalans were in FMA. And I think that's such an important conversation to have, which is one reason I love that so many people watch FMA at a younger age, because for some people it's their introductory anime that helps them, like, I guess, form the standards of expectation about how anime is supposed to work. Naruto is another huge one, and it's very purposely in the beginning, as there's different versions, but the versions that a lot of kids come across are the ones that kind of start that conversation quietly and build to it over time, because Naruto also is very anti-authoritarian. And then it's kind of 1904, they're rebelling against totalitarian regime. No, yes, Andrew, 1984 is 110% in every way, shape, and form what so many of these stories are based off of, as what to warn against, what to not allow happen. Because that's exactly what, there's so many different mediums to discover this and to explore this. I combine those words, but there's so many different ways to explore this. And 1984 is a very effective lens, a very effective, I think, inspiration for so many. Because if you think about when anime was popularized, it was certainly after 1984, because the medium was not capable of being popularized before. But yes, so there is, I think, George Orwell was an incredibly effective author in that he created such a seminal work directly to call out all forms of oppression that are normalized through totalitarian regimes. And there are always totalitarian regimes. Oh, we are in one right now. But like, it's exactly, Andrew, exactly. And the scary thing is, I do feel like there was some inspiration that I do think people who have used tech as a opportunity for creating stronger surveillance and a stronger capability of monitoring and policing large scales of people, they may have been inspired a little bit, but they were inspired by the wrong thing. I mean, it's like, you're calling it Palantir? Come on, literally, that is, the whole point is that's the evil thing. It's the evil surveillance tool. Like, come on. Can we have a big sister instead? Ugh, gosh, yes. Yeah, that would be much better. Although, well, actually, maybe you just don't have a big anything, and instead have a healthily structured society where people are given equal access to participate in governmental decisions and are educated well enough to be able to make those decisions without feeling overwhelmed. That would be nice. Universal healthcare would be cool. Universal basic income would be cool. Consistent and free access to education at all levels, no matter what age you are or how often you want to go, would be great too. Wouldn't say no to that. But yeah. Well, because I think the feminine cause is everybody's cause. As one of the really effective methods of, or I guess messages of propaganda, is to create this idea that our struggles are separate. I think that is the entire point of intersectionality, and also what I really appreciate about how anime explores struggle on a class level, on a social level, on a racial level, on a religious level, is it allows all of those things to be present at once. And it's a really great way to also explore concepts that would be, that just in many ways would be harder to communicate through live action adaptations, simply due to financial concerns, budgetary concerns. Hey Brand, hello! And also storytelling concerns. Like, for example, with Gundam 00, I don't know if y'all have watched that show yet. 110 bajillion percent, please watch that show. It is so good. It is so good. I cannot believe it came out in 2007. Like, because the thing that's absolutely nuts, and if you haven't watched that show, I'm going to give a little bit of a quick breakdown about Gundam 00, because I am new. I just recently watched it, so I'm all like, on fire with it, but I feel like the Gundam community obviously has known very effectively about it for a long time, so this is old news, but it is new to me. Oh god, seriously though, Ellie, I know that's one thing I also hate, is that I know that one effective method of protest is choosing to use your taxes as a method of protest, and if I had the financial capital to be able to do that, I would do that. But considering that it is also a very easy way to get yourself jailed, I also recognize I'm not lucky. I am not lucky. I'm not a lucky person. If someone was going to be an easy target for that, it would be me. I have a very bad luck when it comes to bureaucratic systems, where effectively every time I have to interact with them, especially if I need something or if I want to use my voice for something. Hi Aqua, hello! Things do not go well. Ooh, Castlevania is so good. Oh, yes, 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 Andrew. Okay, so I have a list for you. First off, you need to watch Fullmetal Alchemist. Um, I love Brotherhood, but I liked watching it second. I know everybody has different perspectives, but I did kind of like watching Brotherhood second. Mostly maybe just because I was able to interpret the story with a different perspective having seen the first adaptation the first time. Oh, Bobby Christine, we haven't. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, that is such a good story. Brant, yeah, unfortunately, they will come after you, and they will come after you hard. But I do think that there is an effective way to be able to use your taxes to have a kind of opportunity for protest. I just will say that I don't know if I am the ideal person to do that, considering my tax bracket is so low. It's so low. Now, if you are somebody who has a wealth of capital, then you have a significantly stronger capability of using that as a conversational opportunity. I do not. So I would argue most people do not. Yes, Aqua, you're 100% right. Yes. Yes. Ooh. I don't know about that though, Brant. I think the people who are less likely to be audited are the ones who are less likely to also. I think there's a Venn diagram here where the people who are less likely to be audited are less likely to be politically responsive in the way that is seen as negative towards the right, or the alt-right especially. I'm going to say specifically the alt-right. As somebody who obviously has a lot of very clear views about where I lie on the political spectrum, it was recently brought in on a legal level that certain surveillance around social media is now a consistent metric of surveillance. So that can lead to, and is very possible to lead to, some very severe consequences. So they did, Brant, you're right, they did cut funding for the IRS to audit. The likelihood, though, is the people who would be audited are not going to be the wealthy people. They're more likely to be the people who are more likely to end up in the jail system, because the jail system is a modern day slave system, so that it actually ends up helping on a financial level to have more people in the jail system, because our taxes don't necessarily go just to that. Most of our jail systems are for-profit prisons. So when you work in a jail system, you are not paid more than a few cents, but the labor that you output makes billions for the states, and especially the companies that have contracts with those for-profit prisons. So there's, yeah. They don't audit millionaires and businesses. You are right, Brant. You are right. Exactly. That can be more state prison systems. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that's a big conversation, but we could definitely have a conversation about for-profit prisons, state profit prisons, the intersection between them that can happen, or the overlapping that can happen at certain points at certain times, and some of the financial intricacies of that process. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. I would say that about everybody here. We're trying to make sure that we are aware and informed and educated. That is the goal. And one thing I'm very grateful is that the internet is an intense and wild beast, and as capable as it is of radicalizing you in the most intense of negative ways, it is just as capable of offering a hand of clarity when needed. So that is one thing I do really sincerely appreciate. Speaking of AOT, Bobby Christine, actually, so let's think. Let's talk a little bit about I was talking about Gundam 00, which again, if y'all have not watched, 110% recommend. I'm going to do the briefest I'm holding myself to this. Um, the briefest introductory synopsis of that story, little trailer, so that if you are interested in it, you kind of have a better understanding of what you're getting into. But there are very sincere parallels that were especially when I was watching it, it was right after we had invaded Iran again, and there was elements within that show that were discussing the Strait of Hormuz and the way that the U.S. was blockading and the various foreign powers were trying to create essentially using it as a bargaining chip to try and force compliance, and it was backfiring. Yes, Akko, you're so right. Gundam is a huge series. It's been around for a very long time. And from what I've gathered, a friend of ours is very sincerely a fan of Gundam, a serious collector, and all of the things. And so what he recommended is that we start with Gundam 00, which is where we have started. And I see why, because what it does is it helps lay the groundwork for you to understand how the world works and the social and emotional and political components that help you understand if you need to jump farther in the past or farther in the future to grasp the entirety of the points of the story so that you can fall into the story a little better. So with Gundam 00, the main story is it follows a crew called Celestial Being who exist in this era of time that is in the future for us. It was definitely in the future for them because it was made in 2007, but it follows an era where humanity has exhausted the natural resources of oil on the planet. And so what humanity did was they established essentially solar pillars for powering various areas of the world. And there are 3. And then where those pillars are established ended up creating kind of a uniting force where borders between countries were largely dissolved in the favor of uniting around those pillars. And that is one of the core components of the story is these pillars were established and after a lengthy 20-year war to establish them in the first place, to try and save humanity from its own excess and its own consumption. And it led to a restructuring of society in many of the ways that we know it, but also a continuation of many of the things that we would recognize about society today. And it, unfortunately though, did create essentially 3 main governing powers throughout the entire world. And those 3 powers are generally in conflict with one another consistently to gain even more ground, because there are still a few countries, primarily in West Asia, that were not wealthy enough due to decades of foreign intervention and destabilization to divest from oil and invest in the solar power project. And because of that, they are still in states of profound destabilization. So Celestial Being is essentially an international group of people who have come together to try and obliterate war by counteracting their any attempt to wage war, regardless of who is waging the war. So that they can, in a way, it's almost as if Switzerland decided to just kind of come in and nip in the bud any attempt throughout the entire world of beginning or starting a conflict. And it follows the stories of multiple different members, and you find out that one of the members is from a country that many, like in the fandom, relate rather to Palestine, a country that has been horrifically treated again and again and again by those in power, and then also the ways that all of these large-scale powers are attempting to maintain their power and are never content with the power they have. And it's absolutely wild because, again, this is all through the lens of like a mecha anime and the ways that ways that humans use technology to avoid their own accountability for their own mistakes as a population, but also how, manipulation can be done through propaganda. And it was absolutely just mind-boggling for me to watch because it was so relevant to today. It was like somebody had just made this and had been taking current day news lines out of it. But that was the whole point of the anime, is that the conflicts that are happening are consistently cycling again and again and again. And you have to have this question of, when are you going to stop the cycle? And what are you going to do when the cycle finally is broken? Are you ever going to allow this to happen? Or are you going to allow even the most understandable of desires for violent accountability to take precedence over long-term, large-scale peace? It was a really fascinating show, and I 110 bajillion% recommend watching it. You'll feel a lot. I was yelling at the TV a lot. But yes. Let me see. Wait, where needs to be abandoned? Oh, Alcatraz? Yes. No, Andrew, you were right. He was trying to reopen Alcatraz and use it as a deportation prison, just like he tried to make Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. And unfortunately, even though they said that was closed, it is not closed. It is still technically in operation, and people are still disappearing from it because over 1,000 people disappeared and have not been accounted for. Who had been housed there. So, yeah. But also Alcatraz itself, it was near San Francisco, right? Yeah, Brant, you can only... I mean, can you imagine that's what is going on with the person you're working for, is they're proposing these horrific crimes against humanity, and you're just like, hope he forgets about that one. Like, what? That's who you're working for? That's who you are supporting? Are you kidding me? I don't know why anybody would think that's an okay thing to even joke about. That's nuts to me, that the amount of things that come out of that man's mouth or into the Twitter or Truth Social verse. Ugh, God. Man. Okay, so that is... San Quentin. Oh, yeah, Brant, that's true. I think one thing that has been happening, actually, is that several warehouses have been used that are in the middle of, very, populous areas near schools, near places, residential spaces where people are living and just existing, and they're being turned into deportation centers with little to no regulation. You can't go inside. Even, governing, people who are voted on to represent the people, our Congress people, are not allowed inside. And even if they are, they're not allowed to actually have a full view of what's going on. There is little to no accountability external to the Department of Homeland Security, and that is a big problem because you cannot ask the people who are making the decisions to then audit themselves. They're not going to find anything wrong because that would cost them money, and they make a lot of money. Every person they have in one of those spaces makes them money. So I know, Ellie. Well, you know, you'd think they'd have been mad enough about Jeff. But no. I guess their values aren't that strong that they care long enough. I mean, you know what? Actually, there is a representative in California who was running for governor recently, and this is how I forgot that accountability could happen. Who was it? Eric Swalwell. He was accused of SA by several of his staff members, and within a week he stepped down from Congress. His political career is over. He will never be able to work in politics again. And you know, that's Andrew Jeff E. Little St. James Jeff. That Jeff. His best friend that people don't want to... He pretends he doesn't know, but he's signed the birthday card for. That Jeff. Yeah. Somehow, yeah. Well, that's true. I do think it's actually kind of interesting how Vance has been criticizing the Pope for not being religious enough. Bruh. But yeah. The guy, yeah, that one. Yes, Andrew, yes. But which one, Brant? I haven't I don't know if I heard about that one yet. But I am curious. But okay, let's also talk about Attack on Titan, because I have heard a lot of people say that Attack on Titan is like pro fascism. And what's interesting is I, in a way, could kind of see how that could be interpreted until, and again, I haven't finished Attack on Titan because emotionally it was really hard for me to watch. I'm already have a hard time with gore as it is. It's a little easier for me with anime, a little bit, not always, but a little bit, but just the pure, just struggle of watching that show, and it is an unblistering reality of war. There is no glory in war, and I think that is the point, to me, of Attack on Titan, is there is no glory in war. There is nothing to celebrate about it. It is a just unvarnished, ugly, exhausting, sickening experience of death, constantly, left, right, and center. Doesn't matter how much you love someone, doesn't matter how much you care about somebody, there is nothing that differentiates between who lives and who dies. And I think that's the point. That's exactly it, Aqua. Yes. I think that's exactly what Aqua said, is the idea is that the whole overwhelming amount of headlines makes you overwhelmed, exhausted, apathetic, because it feels unending. But I think that's also why it's so important that there are people following up, and to keep yourself aware of what is happening after, because so many of the things that are proposed on a political level are not able to fully follow through because they get struck down in the court systems. And even though these are quite a few of the court appointees are Republican leaning or even chosen by MAGA and Trump's administration, they're still not legally able to support the ideas that are being pushed through in these headlines. And I think that's really important to remember, because otherwise that whole purpose does work. it creates this sense of learned helplessness where you're just sitting there getting shocked every time you open your phone, every time you see what's going on, and you get so overwhelmed you become immobile. And so you just kind of give up and keep taking the pain, even if there is an opportunity to walk away from it. And I think that's Ellie, yeah. Oh, that's a good, yeah. That's a good, nice. That was very clever. One thing I was also very excited about to see is, I don't know if y'all know about, in Hungary, there was a fascist leader named Oberon who had been running the country for many, many years and becoming more and more totalitarian as time went on. And almost as soon as Vance went and visited and expressed support, the people of Hungary were like, oh my god, get me away from this. No, if Vance likes this, nope, that is, nope, final nail in the coffin that we needed. And they completely landslide victoried him out. It was great. It is good to see that can happen, because that is the exact thing that they want, that the goal of all of this exhaustion with headlines does. Is it helps dissuade you from thinking you have any power, and that if you do decide to exercise the power that you are aware of having, that it will not have Orban. Why do I keep saying Oberon? Orban. Oh my gosh. That if you do exercise your power in voting, in community organization, in connecting to your neighbors, in working with and responding on everything from smaller levels to state levels, that you will not have any effect. And I think that is the most effective lie that a lot of us have internalized, because all it does is encourage destruction. It just encourages a pathway for those who are unscrupulous and cruel to take advantage. Does he really? Oh gosh, I gotta look into him. Okay. What makes you say Gru? Where does that idea come from? I'm curious. That's fun. Okay. So we were going to talk about, so Gundam 00, and now we're going to talk about Attack on Titan. So, Attack on Titan, I was trying to think of, are there any anime that would be seen as possibly right-leaning or conservative? And I realized that, no, actually. And I don't think there are major anime that are clearly that way. There may be some more fringe anime, and of course there's anime that is very purposely Oh, I see. Okay. I see what you mean. And okay. Yay! I'm happy to hear that, Brent. That makes me happy too. But yeah, seeing there, not to say that there isn't any anime ever that has ever been made and that is not center or center right or like fully right leaning or hardcore right. There is, it's a medium, so all humans are capable of using that medium to create. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be anime that espouses very that espouses totalitarian ideas. It is going to exist. It does exist. I am just very fortunate that I have not been able to find any, because I think that is one thing. Really, Aqua, which one comes to mind for you? Because the things that come to mind for me are generally things that I've only ever seen in the context of them having a highly intimate component to them. That's a good question. I know that there are many who consider anime to only be capable of being made in Japan, and then anything made outside of Japan is a cartoon. But That's a debate for the ages, yes. But at the same time, that excludes any animated work made in any other East Asian country, Southeast Asian country, any other country. And the question, I guess, then is like, is this a country-specific medium? And I don't know if that is the case. Whereas I do think there's a difference between Americanized cartoons and European cartoons versus an animated work. I think the issue that I inherently have is that I feel like if you specify that something is only capable of being made in one specific country, but it's a medium that is as large and varied as anime, that excludes anyone else who is interested in exploring the art form. Yes, you're right, Brant. There are lots of Bible-related and religious cartoons. Yeah. And a lot of our media is, again, that's the other thing about anime that is so important when it comes to how we interpret it and recognize it, is that anime was not a popular thing. It was not a popular thing until very recently. I would say, until the 2010s, I don't think many people actually found anime to be an acceptable public thing that many people were open about relating to. It was not like a normal thing. It was, I think actually even 2020 was a huge component for that because of COVID and a lot of people kind of discovering anime due to the pandemic and recognizing its value and its worth. And I don't think pre-2010 that was a consistent pattern. I actually think many people did not admit to really liking anime, or if they did, the anime that was often the first you might find, or that would be recommended, or that people assumed it to be, was always things that had very highly sexualized portrayals of like high school girls and almost like a hentai reimagination of human dynamics. Like, and that's, yeah, that too. It was either thought of as only a medium for like cartoon style kid related, kid friendly content, or it was like this hypersexualized idealization of like fetish almost of high school things. But there's so much more than just that. And there is, I think an incredibly healthy amount of anime that is doesn't fit into those parameters at all. And of course, a lot of people's first animes ever were in the US was Sailor Moon, because it was one of the first animated shows to be shown in the US. And that was what, 1999? 1998? Yeah, I think it was 1999, 1998. But it was one of the very first animated shows to make it to the US. And so that show was targeted towards a mid to young adult audience generally, but it did have more adult themes as well in the manga. It's just that is what people assumed. Now, I know that at the same time there were spaces like there was, what was it called? The little robot guy. Toonami or Adult Swim. Like the thing with the trend that had been going on for so long, where you may find like animated shows that would play like really late at night, when they had like TV programming that would structure based on time, knowing like and being planned around when people would be more likely to be asleep or not based on age. So Speed Racer, really? Toonami, thank you, Aqua. Yes. Oh, it was Pokemon, Dragon Ball, and Sailor Moon. Oh, okay. That makes sense. It was a separate situation. Okay, so you had Toonami, you also had Adult Swim, and they were two different spaces for discovering. And I think Adult Swim had more than just like it wasn't just anime, it was anime and a lot of other things as well. From 3 until 5. Oh, so that was geared towards when kids were coming home from school. Okay. Oh. Oh. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm learning things. I am glad. Thank you. But yes. Okay. So you did have these opportunities to learn more, but they weren't necessarily, they weren't as normalized in mainstream media as they are now, for sure. And there was definitely a very strong social stigma around people who were fans of anime. And that goes for not just like external to Japan, but absolutely in Japan. So there's this sense of otherness, and you could be picked on for being an anime fan, you could be picked on for being a manga fan, for caring deeply about certain stories and connecting over your love of those stories. Like, cosplaying was not this multi-billion-dollar industry. I don't know if it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now, but it was not like a very lucrative industry until relatively recently in the grand scheme of things. Like, I think in the last maybe like 5 to 10 years, it's probably become significantly more lucrative than it was before then. And a lot of that has to, again, do with the popularization of anime and the kind of community that forms around it due to social media. Yes. Zoids. Never heard of Zoids. What's Zoids? I've never watched Yu Yu Hakusho either. Although I do remember a lot of people telling me that Inuyasha was really good, and I did not watch Inuyasha either. But, okay, so, yeah. Oh, okay, so basically when there was more opportunity to own the anime and by pirating it or by having access to something that was not as consistently available. Okay, I see what you mean. Oh. Oh. That is fascinating. I did not realize that. Wow. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, like, I remember watching Pokemon when I was very little. It was one of the things that both my sibling and we could put on, and it was like, okay, we both like this. So we wouldn't argue about it. And that was, yeah. But that was, I think another component of that too is that I know that my sibling loved the cards and also I think was a little bit more involved and introduced to it earlier, but I don't know, we shared so many things so that I don't know, I guess the timeline of that does kind of become blurred, but I didn't realize, I didn't realize that it was one of the first ones. That's fascinating. That's cool. I don't know why I thought it was later, but maybe it's just because I came to it later, but that still. Anyways, here we go. So let's get back to Attack on Titan and right-wing anime. What I've been trying to establish essentially is the concept that being a fan of anime for many, many years was not a popular thing. It was something that I wouldn't say guaranteed, but it could encourage a sense of social ostracization. If you were very open about your interest or adoration or desire to work in anime, even in Japan. So it definitely meant that a lot of the people who were attracted enough to the medium to be able to make their living in the medium were already used to navigating certain social inequities due to their own natural inclinations. that the things that brought them comfort, made them feel deeply, were also the things that they were judged for. And so I think it also helped lend a space for the medium to become an opportunity to actually discuss the very real, large-scale social issues. And so I do feel like you see a lot of anime focuses on massive social issues that have left the protagonist in a state of loss, and that protagonist is trying to figure out how to overcome that loss, establish their identity outside of that loss while acknowledging the loss, and also figuring out how to survive in an environment that already has rejected them. And that is, to me at least, I feel like a pretty consistent pattern. You can see it in Naruto, you can see it in Gundam, you can see it in Fullmetal Alchemist, you can see it in Cowboy Bebop, you can see it in Jujutsu Kaisen, you can see it in Demon Slayer, you can see it. There's just all the popular ones. You see them again. You see that same concept again and again and again, and it really focuses on the importance of community to overcome adversity, as well as strengthening one's personal capability and navigating one's personal traumas in order to be a better member of a larger group to overcome large-scale struggles. Code Geass, also, same. And, all of these are stories of people who, in any other context, would be identified as dangerous, as, terrorists, as extremists, because of their willingness to acknowledge the cracks in the system that may be working for everyone else, but they had real world experience of what happens when it doesn't work for you. And I think that is such an important conversation, but that isn't always the conversation that happens in non-animated mediums. So you don't always get that story. You might get the kind of like down on their luck, pull them up by the bootstraps sort of conversation, especially in American media. But because of the American lens that has a lot of propagandized incentive into winning and becoming the one who makes the decisions, and identifying the problems as always stemming from one bad apple versus a systemic problem, you have a very different perspective, because in a lot of animated structures, you have villains, but the villains are in pursuit of something more complex than a simple, if you topple this one villain, then everything will be okay. You can fix everything. It's more consistent that the pattern is, if you topple this one villain, that's one battle towards overcoming the rest of the system that is working towards a totalitarian structure, or to overcome a totalitarian issue. Ergo Proxy is another really good example of that as well. And again, when we go back to AOT, I think it's one that a lot of right-wing people may have misidentified as possibly like a dog whistle, and I want to get into why. So with AOT, and I'm sorry, spoiler alert, if you have not watched it, it does of course follow the lives of these kids living on this island in you can't tell what era, what time period. You can't tell where they are. You don't know really anything about the social or ethnic structure of the world they live in. But as far as you know from the beginning of the series, you have an island where all the rest of humanity no longer exists external to this island, and the entirety of humanity is housed within this specially walled city system. And that is because there are these monstrous creatures called Titans that are horrifically disturbing, that are human eating. And they have very little, I guess, strategic capability, their one goal is to consume. And so they are also extraordinarily strong. They're very dangerous. They're very terrifying. And it follows the story of ultimately a very small group of friends who become involved in protecting what they know of their home. And it develops into a much larger conversation about what happens when you have destabilization of dynasty over time. And what was interesting is I saw there was this person, this creator, who kind of talked about the background story that led to some of the final major decisions with Attack on Titan, from the perspective of being a Jewish person who had family that were affected profoundly by the Holocaust, and had, were survivors, and also had to be destabilized and refugee, and become refugees, and see what happened to their homes and their everything that had been the structure of their lives, and how that then affected his perspective when watching the show. And I was fascinated by that because I had seen a couple of people discussing how the story was a right-wing dog whistle, because the idea had been that many in the story, many generations earlier, there had been a group of people who were capable of basically, they had this special power that was devastating and very detrimental to their enemies. I'm trying not to give spoilers. I know I said spoiler alert, but I'm trying not to give too many spoilers, but detrimental to their enemies. And so they were able to take over huge swaths of land in the world and use their special power to keep their enemies in check. And so they ended up enslaving anybody who was in opposition to them. And they were relatively tyrannical rulers. And so eventually a group within this society decided to fight back and help the enslaved people regain autonomy and safety. And it led to this shift where anybody who had been part of that ruling ethnicity was toppled and then enslaved instead, and put into ghettos and removed from any positions of power, and had to be identified every space that they went. And the next group of people who became the ruling class proved to be just as tyrannical. And so it led to this back and forth fight between these two groups of people trying to essentially establish dominance as each one went back and forth. And there were, of course, groups of people within each faction who were very peace-focused, and groups of people who were tyrannical. And of course, the ones who were tyrannical were the most likely to be able to maintain and gain power. And eventually, you kind of discover how this all ends up relating back to the original members that you start the story with. And what I have seen is some people have related the white male experience to that original group of people who were in power, had this special capability, so that gave them the right to rule, and then were forced into other way around. So the people who were enslaved were the oh my gosh, what do you say? I guess you would say MAGA, and then the people who had the power and the special ability were kind of ethnic minorities now. And then when the people who are MAGA were able to overcome, they then recreated this cycle of essentially abuse. And it sounds absolutely nuts to say out loud because it doesn't work that way. really ever. But I think that's also the idea behind some of the dog whistling. Interesting question. Why do you ask? Are you gonna give me my weight in gold? Okay. Anyways. Let's see. Just a note, if you have any other unrelated comments to our topic today, you might not be able to stay. Oh, yay! Good night, Andrew! Thanks for being here. I'm glad you made it. Oh, I see. Okay. Alright. Troll's gonna troll. Well, I can tell that you're not interested in the discussion, so have a good night. Cool. There we go. Okay. Aw, man. Cool. Okay. Anyways. So anime. Alright, so the idea was, and this is why I, even when I was saying it, I had it flipped around because it makes so little sense to me, is the idea is that the people who were the kind of right wing see themselves as the oppressed minority who was able to overtake the tyrannical rule and then were constantly fighting to maintain their rule. And oh, Aqua, thank you. I can do that right now, actually. There we go. Why can't I see? Okay. Can I? Why wouldn't it let me? Is it doing it? Hold up. Save! Got it. I haven't, Roberto. I haven't. Have you? But, alright, so you're all set now, Aqua. You should be good to go. But yeah, if anyone else wants to be a mod, please let me know. Also, you know what? Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe people are interested in seeing what I have to say if they're getting trolls. But yes, no, I have not tried braces. But we were talking about... You have the power! Yes! That sounds like a superpower. Oh, that's cool. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anyways, so with AOT, oh, you're so right, Brant. You're so right. Interesting. Very interesting. But yes, I think that's the thing, is they have to reach so hard to be able to find messages that could possibly be interpreted in their favor within a medium that is created by people who generally are more aware of the difficulties of oppression, and even just the relatively softer experiences. Thank you, Aqua. Thank you so much. By the general blah, 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 what was I saying? The general intricacies of pain and difficulty when you are not accepted by a group dynamic. Now, they were then able to expand that into much larger conversations about international conflict, which also, incidentally, become the most, I think, popular anime. I mean, like Dragon Ball Z, for example, was all about fighting this like tyrannical dictator who wanted to control all things that existed because he felt it was owed him. And there was no reason for that other than his own desire to feel powerful. And that is such a core of the story. And Dragon Ball Z is also such a, I think, consistently popular anime through the ever since it was made and popularized. So it's fascinating to me that the only options the right has when it comes to anime, because anti-authoritarianism is baked so deeply into the story structure and the mentality of how the kind of core stories flow, that the best many can do is to just say, oh, there's nothing political about this at all, and take it at the most face value you possibly could. Fullmetal Alchemist is not about fighting fascism. It's about alchemy. And Cowboy Bebop isn't about struggling under the cruelties of poverty and broken bureaucratic systems that lead to overly powerful. Yeah, I am Aqua. Thank you. I appreciate that. Overly powerful syndicate like criminal organizations that don't have to abide by basic rules of human decency because they're a criminal organization. Bobby Christine, yeah, they do. It's a level of focus and I just almost mind-numbing focus on avoiding the truth that's right in front of them, because it somehow is cognitively dissonant. Like, it is absolutely incredible to me how you can have someone sit down and watch Naruto or Attack on Titan and walk away from that and see it as its most surface level thing. Yes, exactly, Brant. In Princess Mononoke is clearly about protecting the environment, but also about the very real harms of colonialism, regardless of if the person who is trying to enact the colonialism is trying to do it to protect people who are suffering. Like, for example, what's her name? The leader of Irontown. She's trying to create a safe space for women who are and people who are experiencing health issues because of all the lepers, and basically anybody who is experiencing rejection from society, by taking over an area that she has no right to and utilizing the natural resources there for her own benefit in order to sincerely protect people who were harmed by the systems that they live in. And there's a very real noble effort in that, but at the same time, she is only able to provide that space because she's taking cruelly from a whole area that is not consenting to be part of that contract that is the social contract. Nature is not asking to be part of our towns. It was not asking to be, cut into pieces of furniture and homes and melted down into various things that we use to live. There is, of course, the as well, Ashitaka is kind of a representative of like indigenous ways of living, because he is a representative of an indigenous peoples who are dying out due to the colonialism of the world that is also represented by the people from Irontown. Even though he's trying to help them survive, and he is torn between his love for and desire to be part of the natural balance and system, he also doesn't want to abandon the people who are just as in need, but don't know how to survive without using the colonialist structure. It's a fascinating movie. I'm still like, man, that was a thing that so many kids saw. So many children saw that and thought and didn't, of course, weren't immediately going to understand all those things, but it starts the conversation. It opens your mind up to those conversations. And you, even at its most surface level, you cannot avoid the truth of the goal of Princess Mononoke. Recognizing the importance of the natural world, and also recognizing the selfishness and cruelty of humans who may have the best intentions. It's fascinating. But that is, again, only just, it's an intro, it's like not an intro example, it's just one example that a lot of people get exposed to at a very young age. But anime in general, the main structure of how so many of the stories are organized, even the ones that go really deep into fan service, even the ones that have a lot of like highly sexualized components to it, they don't have less to say on a social or cultural or political level. They just may also include a higher component of like kind of sexualized characterization, which again is still fascinating to me when it comes to like how anime in general is just very hard to write in a way that is pro-authoritarian. I mean, gosh, even like One Punch Man, like it's just always a condemnation of idealizing one specific social mores and instead deciding to question and even combat social assumptions. It's just, there's so many options. And of course that brings us back to One Piece, which so many people see as a kids show about pirates, and it is a show about a terrorist trying to topple a tyrannical global power. But yeah, it's absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild how much work one has to do to avoid that messaging. And I feel like, we didn't really talk about Code Geass. We didn't go too deeply into Fullmetal Alchemist. We have barely even talked about, we made one kind of brief mention of Cowboy Bebop. And still, like the first animes that come to mind, I mean, even Sailor Moon. I mean, literally, there's a whole part of Sailor Moon where they literally beat up cops, and it's part of the story. This was a very purposeful choice by the creator, because the cops are trying to negatively interfere and act as like a tyrannical source of power in that environment. I mean, it's nuts. But yeah, Sailor Moon is ACAB, if you didn't know, is pro ACAB. But yes, even though I guess in a way they are also kind of like a force of justice and a peacekeeping force, which would make them cops. That's an interesting thought. I didn't think about that until literally just now. Oh, they are? That's so cute. That's so cute. Is that why the Tuxedo Mask and the guy from Yu Yu Hakusho have the same hairstyle? They do, don't they? Oh, Brant, that is such a misunderstanding. It's nuts. The Punisher has been one of the least... Okay, Fight Club, the Punisher, The Matrix. Gosh, there's so many movies that the right have taken to, and especially incel culture has taken to mean one thing that is so radically the opposite. The whole point of, Punisher is anti-oppressive systems of government. And everything about the Punisher. He's just as, he hates cops. He was a cop and he hates cops. So the, who was it? The, I think the creator of the Punisher did have something to say about that when he kept seeing cops put the Punisher logo on their cop cars. He was not a fan. He was not okay with it. He was very frustrated. I remember seeing an article about that, like, all the way back in 2020, where it was like, I can't believe, what have you done to my art? Yeah. And, you know, the same thing goes when it comes to, what do you call it? Fight Club, where the story is about a man who starts essentially a terrorist organization, essentially to disrupt the structure of society, but also to feed his own ego, and is a commentary on how especially white men who do not evaluate or recognize their own unhealthy, like, one, their own privilege, and two, the ways that they may not be taking care of their own health, can then create really dangerous, huge social problems. 100% Aqua. 100%. Yeah. He's basically, what's it called? Internal affairs, but he's not internal anymore. And he's a little bit more clearly violent. And he also doesn't he doesn't just reassign cops who've done bad things to different districts to avoid accountability, which is what generally happens even when cops kill or, you know, murder their wives or families. Anyways, so if I'm not very good for the algorithm, am I? But yeah. Okay. So yeah. So essentially that is the thing. What at the core of it, the structure of the medium that these stories are being told through does not work for supporting authoritarianism. Also, because most anime is structured through the mindset of a singular voice, which is established in the protagonist. And it's rare that a singular protagonist is going to be very interesting to watch if all they want to do is lick boots. Unless that's your thing. Anyways, that's a different conversation. Thanks, Brant. Thanks. But yeah, if they are trying to become the system or part of the system, even in an animated structure, the way that that story is still accomplished is by being the underdog who overcomes all of the expectations and the obstacles, despite, and also in that process of the protagonist having to overcome those obstacles, it calls out the problems that allow those obstacles to be there in that way in the first place. So you're constantly having to question why this is okay. And in non-animated media, you may not have the same structure. You may have a different conversation or a different opportunity for storytelling devices that can lead to a more propagandized structure of storytelling. Now, that does not, again, go to say that there are no propagandized animes. Anime is a medium. It is not a sole thing. So there are hundreds of thousands of different ways of approaching storytelling in anime. But the most popular, which in turn become the most financially successful, are generally the ones that ultimately end up calling out sincere large-scale issues through the lens of a protagonist trying to figure out what to do about those issues and overcoming obstacles that seem impossible. Again, Naruto is a good example. But so is the entire Gundam franchise. And, at the same time, what's interesting is a lot of animes were also made in order to sell products. Gundam, it was made to sell toys. But the series creator was like, no, I'm going to have a serious conversation using this. And the toy selling will go hand in hand eventually, because that's what happens. But what's interesting is if you are outside of the Gundam community, then I'm saying this as somebody who only just recently started watching Gundam like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, not even that. The general focus is on the products that are made out of the show and people who are obsessed with the products. It doesn't often, you don't see a lot of marketing materials that like to highlight what the story is actually about, because the story itself is very engaging, but it's not an easy thing to put into a sellable soundbite that can be used to quickly grab your attention and get you to check out in a couple of seconds. So instead, you see a lot more conversation about the collections and being a Gundam collector and the intensity of that process and experience. And I think that stuff like that is very purposeful, where you will have something that is made even with the goal of being used for... Yup! Aqua, that is it. It is hard to market it. It's very hard to market it. Especially if you're trying to engage new viewers. But I think that also, to me, just shows that it is 110% possible to successfully have those stories and explore all of the ranges of human emotion and the complexity of the reality of being human and navigating large-scale destabilization and one's place within it in storytelling. But I do think that in general, a lot of other mediums and art forms that are maybe more accessible in the West are a little scared of having those conversations, or are not as likely to get the financial backing to have those conversations, which is, I think, one reason with anime, one of the ways that they've been able to circumnavigate that is by creating a lot of product associated with those animes. Like, Jujutsu Kaisen is very much as well also a story that is breaking down the ways that, you having, again, child soldiers who are being used to and trained to fight some great evil, but the way that they are being used to fight that evil becomes more and more suspect as you learn more about the organization that trains them, and the ways that they then respond in those moments, and what that leads to. Thinking of Geto and Gojo right now. It does absolutely force you to have very complex conversations with yourself, and then as well with whatever community has formed around those shows, to really deconstruct what that means. And there are complex stories, there are complex narratives, and the characters are nuanced. But you're not going to see a lot of that in the selling material that allows those stories to be told. So it's an interesting way of examining how even anti-authoritarian stories can still find a way to maintain a foothold in a ultimately authoritarian tool, which is capitalism. Because capitalism makes it a lot easier to normalize authoritarian structures in a society. If you're always trying to fight to dedicate your life to attaining capital, and there is a very limited amount that's allowed to go around, and instead, it's getting highly concentrated in very specific areas. Everybody's trying to fight for the opportunity to get in the door for a position that would get them a chance at that kind of financial capital and capital is then equated to freedom, it's not surprising then that you can shift and introduce more and more conversations that lead to totalitarianism when we're already primed in that way. Yeah, Aqua. I mean, I think that's the thing. Are there any? Because Sailor Moon, child soldier. Like, are there any? Really? Like, I don't know how many I can actually think of that don't ultimately have something like that. Huh. Yeah! Yuri on Ice. Oh, jeez. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. A dragon goes house hunting. Oh, Lord. Does Ouran High School Host Club count? I have not watched that because of the title. Because it feels weird to think of a high schoolers having a host club, but that's just me. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. What about Fruits Basket? No, Fruits Basket? Nana. No child soldiers. Unhoused children. Drug addicted children. But not soldiers. Okay. I thought of 2. I got 2. But yes, they're primarily kind of discussing this concept, probably because it is such a consistent pattern in human history. Like, we really, especially in the West, I think have this general idea that child soldiers are a far away thing that doesn't happen here. No child soldiers. True. Okay. Hey. Still about war, but yeah, it's still very anti-Nazi. But no child soldiers. You're right. You're right. That's true. Okay. Yay! We got 3. We got 3. Let's see. But yes, one thing that anime has done. It absolutely does, Brant. Yes, no, that I agree wholeheartedly. But at the same time, you know, if you think about it, you know, if we, like, I know a lot of our families, if anyone was involved in like World War II or the Vietnam War or the Korean War, they were going off to war at 17. They're supposed to be 18, but sometimes at 17. Sometimes people were lying about their age and going off earlier. And that's if you were going from the US, which unfortunately was often the aggressor in those situations or the colonizer in those situations. But, you know, if you are in a space where your land is being invaded, the likelihood of you having to fight for your survival and safety, your age goes down pretty fast. It happens to you a lot sooner because if you have people coming into your home country, regardless of what the intention might be, if there is like destabilization they're trying to support or not, whatever the deal is, the likelihood is the average person is more likely to be exposed to that violence if they're the ones being invaded. And the US, at the very least, has not been invaded for a very long time. But because we did the invading, and then we keep doing that in a lot of other places. So, you know, generally, the perspective of children or younger people who have been exposed to the violence of colonialism and of destabilization is more common than I think we often like to think about. We like to think of it as having happened many, many years ago, but it's happening now all over the world. And, you know, I think it, again, is important to recognize that we, as a global society who have responded to anime so strongly, really, really do resonate with those stories because they are so prevalent to what we have all grown up with and the propaganda we're questioning, either about other countries or about our own. So all of it is so necessary. And because it's necessary, it also means that we always have those who are too uncomfortable with that conversation and try to pretend it's not happening. So, yes. Anime is built with the opportunity for an anti-authoritarian lens. And I do think the majority of viewers recognize that in the particular structure of the show that they're watching. That doesn't mean that that message then gets expanded elsewhere, but it does start the conversation. And I think that's incredibly important. Which is one reason I'm very happy that we're seeing more and more people care about anime and become interested in it and want to discuss the topics that it explores and want to give anime a chance that it was not consistently given for many, many years. So I am very happy to see how that keeps happening. And then as we all keep discovering anime that has been around either for a long time or that maybe we just personally haven't found, and then we get an opportunity to discuss it and rediscover it and find parallels and also learn about things we didn't always realize. Like when I was watching Gundam 00 and they could have just, the things that they were talking about in that show were being pulled from the headlines of that exact moment that I was watching it. It just shows you a perspective that you maybe didn't have when that anime came out. Because again, that anime, for me at least, it came out, not for me, but that anime came out in 2007, and in 2007 I didn't realize. And so now I'm looking at it, I'm an adult now. I can see the patterns, and it gives me an opportunity to recognize that the things that I maybe believed then weren't accurate. It gives me an opportunity to reflect and to grow and to learn. So it's an endlessly useful medium because it is a very effective storytelling medium that can encompass so many things. And sometimes, also allow for us to question normalized tropes that we don't always recognize as questionable until we see them reflected back at us in the art that we're taking in. So, okay. I hope that helped, was interesting. But yeah, let me know. What do y'all think? And is there anything that you feel like I missed? I feel like there's a lot that will come to me in, a couple of hours. But until then, I will see you all again for sure on Sunday. And I will try and get my next video out as soon as I possibly can. So yeah, thank you so much for jumping in tonight. And I hope that if you want to continue this conversation on Sunday, I would be happy to. If there's another topic you'd like to discuss on Sunday, I would love to do that as well. I'm also open to having more consistent Discord watch parties where we maybe watch an episode of something and then discuss it. But if you are interested, let me know in the Discord. And also, let's see. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in tonight and having this conversation. It was really fun. And I will see you all on Sunday evening. All right. Good night.